and think more about just how the layout is put together in terms of where do you go to actually do things within the software? How do you enter the actual data within the software? So clearly the middle point of the page here is going to be the display part of the software. And then on the left-hand side, we have our navigation tools on the left. And then we also have some drop-down navigation tools up top, the primary one being the cog up here. Now, the general way I would tend to think of it, the way I think of it is that if I'm doing normal day-to-day type of input, data input, then I'm usually somewhere on the left-hand side, and usually I'm looking at forms. The shortcut to the forms is up top. So we're going to be going into here. This has everything broken out by basically what I would call the cycles. So you have the customers, the vendors, and the team. Now, I also just want to touch in on the fact that some of the terminology that you will hear in QuickBooks is pulled in from the old QuickBooks or QuickBooks Desktop. So, and this is really important because terminology kind of matters when, of course, you want to communicate with people. So, and I want to just try to lay this out as we go through our system here, because when you're in the accounting world, you're going to have communication that you might come from a book problem kind of standpoint. People that have gotten degrees in accounting, for example, might use different kind of terminologies and whatnot, versus people that work within the accounting department or bookkeepers, which are going to use terminology that might be more specific to the particular softwares that they are using. Many softwares having similar kind of terminologies that are going to have more, again, specific kind of names for what they're doing. And then you've got kind of more casual kind of terminology when you're interacting with the accounting department, say talking to clients, or when you're calling an accounting department or something like that. In other words, terms, for example, like a credit. If you think about a credit from a book problem, then we're talking debits and credits, part of the double entry accounting system. If you're thinking about a credit in terms of the QuickBooks software, then you might be thinking about an actual form that you're generating, which might be a credit type of form. And if you're thinking about a credit as kind of someone that's calling the accounting department or discussing like with a customer, for example, a credit might mean to them that we're decreasing, the amount that they owe us, for example. Now, there's reasons why all those terms are kind of related, but we have to kind of keep those different things in mind. So when we're communicating to different people, we understand what is happening. And so I'll try to touch in on that all the time. Now, in the old system, I'm just going to jump over here to the home page of the old home page for the QuickBooks Desktop. I'm going to bounce over here from time to time because, again, we have a legacy of the old system that is still being used in the terminology of the new system, and because it has this nice flow chart. This flow chart basically is still the basic flow chart of any kind of accounting system, so it's just a great reference tool over here. Now, if you look at this flow chart, you've got the vendors, you've got the cycles, and the employees. This is one way that we can think of, in essence, our accounting processes. We can break them down into what I would call cycles. So when we think about the accounting process in terms of what happens like in a month, we might put it in order of date when things happen, but then we also might put it in order of cycle, the things that are connected to each other in cycles. So the vendor cycle is the cycle that deals with us dealing with people that we pay money to. So our vendors that we're going to be paying money to, the people we buy inventory from, the utility bills and the monthly expenses, and so on and so forth. So you might also call this like the expense cycle or the money out cycle. Ultimately, money's going out, right? And then you've got the customer cycle, which you might call like the money in cycle. That's the revenue generation, revenue cycle. You might call it that, or the sales cycle. And then you've got the employee, or you might call it the payroll cycle. So it's useful to break out your thinking and thought process in these formats because it simplifies the way you're thinking of things, because you're thinking of things in the related cycles rather than kind of a hodgepodge of everything that just happens on a monthly type of basis. And so this terminology of cycles is basically still being pulled in here. As you can see, the customer, the vendor, and then we have the other cycle. The team is in essence kind of like the payroll cycle. And there's always this tension, I think, with the online programmers that they want to stay, some of them, they want to stay the same as what we've done before because consistency is useful. But then I think you also have this tendency that they want to break away from some of the old terminology now that they have a new layout, and some of the old terms might not make as much sense, such as lists and stuff like that. So we'll touch on that as we go. Now the customer cycle here, these are what we call forms. So once again, the form term is something more specific within the data input software than you might see if you were talking about like someone that learned from an accounting textbook at a college or something like that. To us in QuickBooks, the forms are the data input forms that create the actual data input. So this is where we're going to put the data in that will create the journal entries that create actually the financial statements, and we can break these forms out by customer, by vendor, and then like the payroll cycle in essence are the three cycles of those forms. Now these forms can usually be found more than in just one place. So in other words, you can usually find these forms basically on the left-hand panel here as well, and this would be the day-to-day kind of data input that we would be doing.